This is Extra Points, a Pop Warner podcast. I'm your host, Tim Glaze. We're sharing some of the most compelling stories in sports. On this episode, we chat with six-time NFL Executive of the Year, Super Bowl winning team president, and Hall of Famer, Bill Polian. Bill Polian, thanks for joining us on this episode of Extra Points. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you. You bring a lot of experience in the game, and I want to start off just asking you how much you missed the game now that training camps are starting. Do you feel like you're out of place at the beginning of training camp?
A little bit, yeah. It's been almost 10 years now but given my time in ESPN, not quite, not that much. So when training camp begins, my body clock starts ticking again. So yes, I miss it. The thing I miss most is game day, of course. All of the things that surround being a general manager, contract negotiations and salary cap and all of that. I don't miss quite as much, but certainly I miss game day. And the thing I miss most is the competition committee. That was spent 20 years there, and it's an absolute joy working with all those people and working with all of the issues that surround the game.
Are you still following the game closely?
Oh, yeah. I follow it closely, and I've served on a couple of committees that the league has set up, one that sort of set up a shadow competition committee to handle the issues around COVID, and then served on a couple other committees involved with coaching development. So, I stay active.
So as we head into this new season, what are the stories that you're following?
Well, I think, you're always interested in how the new coaches start off. And it's usually rocky. The reason they changed coaches was because most teams are not good teams personnel-wise. The Bears are the exception to that. The coach there has stepped into almost a ready-made lineup. If he can get the quarterback going, they should be in pretty good shape. Ryan Poles has done a great job there. I'm a little biased. I was part of the selection process there, but he's done a great job. But the other new ones are in positions where they're inheriting less than competitive teams. So from a personnel standpoint, the one thing I look for is, are they making progress? And we won't know that until about week 10. So it's a continuum. It's not a snapshot. The media likes to portray it as 17 one-game seasons, but that's not the way it is. And so I look at the tape every week, and I watch a lot of games on television. But the bottom line is, I want to see the continuum, how people are developing. I think Carolina is one. Do they have enough defense? Is the quarterback going to continue to develop? He grew by leaps and bounds under Dave Canales last year, and the offensive staff did a phenomenal job with the offensive line, and they've added some talent. Dan Morgan's knows talent very well, the GM. So I'll be following that. The defense is the big question. Can the defense even be competitive? If they can be competitive, which they were not last year, then the Panthers should make strides. I'm interested to see how Kansas City does. They're reloading in many respects on offense, so we'll see how that one goes. As long as they have Patrick there for real, that's for sure. But how they develop and how Andy integrates new players into the offense will be interesting. And then, of course, I follow the Bills, and they're at the stage now where they're a bona fide contender, and they just really have to take the last step. So I'll be anxious to see how that goes. They too have done a great job in rebuilding and on the fly. In Coquet, this is really the second generation of players that they've had there, and it's going well. So, and of course, the quarterback is the linchpin there. So those are the things I'm following, and then stories always develop as the season goes along. Stories develop. They're the ones that you never see coming, and bingo, they pop up. This is an interesting statistic that was shared with me when I first joined ESPN. Every year, there's an average of 6 teams that make the playoffs that didn't make it before. So that says two things. One, the league is really volatile. And two, the collective bargaining agreement and the salary cap are working exactly as we designed them.
Perfect. You had mentioned so six new teams every year. That puts your accomplishment of 17 trips to the playoffs and your career. It's definitely a pretty good accomplishment from your standpoint to get there that many times, as volatile as the league is. But one of the things that I think, and it kind of leads into this, and you mentioned coaches and how the coaches are developing. And a lot of times just comes down to the right fit, how coaches are prepared when you get into these new situations. So when you're hiring a coach, what are you looking for on the front end to make sure you get the right fit for your franchise?
Boy, oh boy, how much time do we have? Well, it's really 3 areas. The first is a phrase I learned from the late, great Jim Irsay. I miss him today as we start the season more than ever. I mean, he died. He left us far too young, 65. But he was a great boss and very, very smart football man. You know, he had many other interests in his life, but football was his main interest, and he was brilliant at it. And so the first thing he said is the guy a leader of men? Is he the person who can get them to rally around him and to accept his philosophy and to follow the dictums that he wants them to follow? And so that goes first to communication and second to philosophy of football. He has to have a philosophy of football, how he wants the team to play. My first question for a head coaching interview would always be, tell me what the team's going to look like in 3 years. How are we going to play? When we come out of that tunnel on Sunday, who are we going to be? And so he's got to be able to believe what he's telling you and enunciate it and make the players believe it. That's the bottom line. Secondly, I want him to have a broad knowledge of football with specific expertise on one side of the ball. You can't have specific, detailed expertise on both sides and be a head coach. It's not possible. But you got to have one. He's got to be able to fix one. When something goes wrong, he has to be able to fix it. And then on the side that he's not an expert at, he has to, and by expert, I mean knowing the absolute intricacies of every position and every technique. It's really esoteric stuff, but that's why the interviews take as long as they do. but the area that he is not an expert at, he's got to hire people who are. So when things go wrong, as they invariably do, you have to be able to fix it. You can't simply throw up your hands and say, oh, I don't have enough players, or injuries have debilitated this position. You can't do that. You got to figure out a way to win. Bill Parcells famously said that there's a way to win every game. You just have to figure out how to do it. And so part of that is the ability to fix things when they go wrong. Example is Tony Dungy. Tony's a defensive genius and a defensive expert. And there are many people who have copied his Tampa 2 defense. None have had the success that Lovie Smith had in Chicago and we had in Indianapolis. And that's because Lovie was there at the beginning with Tony in Tampa. He understood the nuts and bolts of the defense as well as anybody. Tony did too. Every time there'd be a bump in the road, every time there would be a slip up, they knew what button to push, what screwdriver to use to fix it. People who get the defense by osmosis or read it from a book just don't know that. And so I would want that guy to really know and his side of the ball, and to be able to hire people who know their side of the ball, so that and they know it intimately. And then finally, being a head coach in the National Football League is an impossible job. And it's worse these days because of the proliferation of media and the proliferation of people who, frankly, don't have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in what they're writing or talking about, particularly talking. So he's got to be able to enunciate what he's doing and at the same time get the players to focus on what they need to do, which is not to listen or read what is being spoken about and written about. Because if you do that, you lose all track with reality. So those two jobs are seemingly antithetical to one another. But that's what he has to do. Again, I'll quote Bill Parcells, 5 things happen every day that you didn't anticipate when you come in the office. You got to be able to deal with those. And you have to tell the players every day, focus on football. Don't pay attention to what's being said. Don't pay attention to what's being written. Pay attention. Do your job, as Bill Belichick famously said. Do your job every day and don't worry about the other stuff. Bill Walsh wrote, who was a friend as well as Bill Parcells. That's why I quote them so often. Wrote, I thought, the greatest football book I've ever read, which is called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And he talks about the process of coaching a football team from the idea of the West Coast offense, which germinated in his mind and came from a crisis. He lost his quarterback when he was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati and had to replace him with a quarterback of completely different stature and skill set. And as a result, invented the West Coast offense. He used to joke about it internally. I was saying the West Coast offense was invented in Cincinnati. And it's, again, an example of a guy who knew when something went wrong, exactly how to fix it. Well, it went from this vision he had to deal with the crisis in Cincinnati to a vision of football where the passing game became preeminent, and particularly the short passing game, zone blocking, all those kinds of things. And then he was able to enunciate that to both his coaches and his players. And it created a revolution in football. It came about because of an emergency that it happens every day. And so that's what you're looking for in a head coach. And I've always preferred, and ironically, I guess, 2 out of 3, we made the Super Bowl in Buffalo and Indianapolis with people who'd been head coaches before. And then Dom Capers was a rookie head coach, but did a great job in Carolina. But given a preference, I'd probably look first at a guy who'd been a head coach before.
You had mentioned blocking out everything, and I think this comes up to your level working with the coaching staff. Is like some of the stories I've looked at from your career is like, and I go to a lot of the Buffalo fans in '85. They had a preference to Doug Flutie going to the Bills, and then you went through it again as the president in Indianapolis, where there's a lot of media that suggested you should have taken another quarterback, and instead you drafted Peyton Manning. So, like, what is it like? Say you block all that out. Like, what are you able to see, and what are you looking for that maybe a fan or somebody in the media is not?
Well, we have a process which the fans and the media don't understand, and I've not shared it with many people other than the fellows that I worked with over time. So, it's proprietary to a large degree, but I'll go over some of it. But the key thing is to follow the process. We had a saying, which we developed over time, both in Carolina and Indianapolis: let the board speak to you on draft day. When it comes to free agents, let the board speak to you. The way you've got them ranked, that's stay with it. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get challenged. Don't question your judgment. Stay with it. That's hard to do. Easy to say, but hard to do. Coach Levy's always, his most famous saying is that what it takes to win is simple, but it isn't easy. So you need to follow that and recognize that the process is preeminent. And if the process is right, it will lead you to the right people. Now, what are we looking for? We're looking for athletic ability. We can measure that. That's what the combine does. All the rest of the combine, by the way, other than the physical exams and the measurables, the television show, I don't even watch it. Never did. It's immaterial. But you can measure athletic ability, and you can measure to some degree, obviously height, weight, and speed. So that's important. Secondly, we're looking for skill sets. Does an offensive tackle have good enough feet to block a fast edge rusher? Does a wide receiver have enough speed to beat press on the line of scrimmage when he has to go on a go route? Does he have enough speed to separate? Does he have good enough hands? What good is a fast receiver if he can't catch the ball? It's just another incompletion. So it's those kinds of on the defensive side of the ball. Does an edge rusher have enough speed to beat an offensive tackle around the edge? We can check that on a stopwatch. Does a linebacker, does a corner have enough ability to change direction at top speed? We can check that on a stopwatch, and we do. That's what the scouts do. And then finally, not finally. Third are the so-called intangibles. Now, if a player is tough, you can at our level, toughness is a given. If you don't have it, you can't survive. It can be developed over time. So I want to hasten to add that when you're talking about young players and young children, if you will, they'll develop toughness over time. You don't have to preach it, and it's part of the job of a youth coach is to inculcate that, find ways to inculcate that. Now, that's not Oklahoma drill, but there are other drills you can do, and you can do one-on-ones and things like that, which are safe, but help the kids to grow and recognize that it's a competitive game. So those are two different things at two different levels. The other stuff, is almost always transferable. Certainly at the high school level, it is. And then finally, what we wanted were smart players who were good people. One of Marv's and Tony's great dictums was, be on time, be a good person, 100% effort all the time is the price of admission. And that part of it, we spent a great deal of time and effort on in trying to find out if players had it. And if they didn't, we weren't interested. And so often, very, very often, the media would see a player one way and be talking about this guy's great, he's going to dominate the league, et cetera, et cetera. He wasn't even on our board because he didn't have the so-called intangibles that we were looking for. But all the coaches that I've worked with believed in that, and that's the kind of players they wanted to coach. And when you put high character, smart, dedicated guys, you put 53 of them in the same locker room, you're going to win more than your share of games.
Absolutely. That's the kind of starts with the team culture. You start with the team culture and work back from that. But I was kind of interested in what you said in terms of the intangibles, in the character, the off the field stuff, the locker room stuff. At our level in Pop Warner, we have these kids at a time in their lives where we're developing that as much as we're developing them on the football field, on and off.
Absolutely right.
So how do you coach to that? If you're a youth coach, if you have any insight on how a youth coach could develop that so that he would be on your radar when the time comes?
Yeah, absolutely. I served on the board of a Pop Warner League in Cornwall, New York, in another life when I was a scout. So I've dealt with it, albeit a long time ago, firsthand. Um, you structure your practices and you structure your program. The word program is no longer in vogue. It's now called culture, but they're synonymous. Your program equals your culture. And so you start with A, be on time. B, take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves. That's from Joe Paterno. C, concentrate on fundamentals, because it is a combative game. And when people start to hit each other, you tend to lose focus. So concentrate on fundamentals, build up the fundamentals so that they become second nature. They become muscle memory. And so in the heat of battle, you can utilize them. That means drills that constantly focus on fundamentals. That means less time for plays for 11 on 11. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. Tony Dungy often said, when things go wrong, do less. In both Indianapolis and in Buffalo, where we had high-powered offenses, we had 4 running plays. 4. Inside zone, outside zone. Belly, trap. 4 running plays. And we just practiced them over and over and over again. And we spent most of our time, even at the pro level, on fundamentals, executing fundamentals. And so at the youth level, I would say that your practices have to be 65 to 70% fundamentals, blocking and tackling, right hand placement when you block, right foot placement when you block, recognition on defense, constant recognition drills on defense, constant backpedaling, constant change of direction. And you can, the more you practice individual skills, the better off you are. The teamwork can wait. Get the ball snapped, have as few plays as possible, and go play. Be the best fundamental team you can be, and guaranteed you're going to win more than your share of games.
Hey all, so just when you thought your fall season could be over, you can get the team together for an exciting new flag football tournament. For the first time, Pop Warner is partnering with NFL Flag to host a national flag football event. The Crown Classic will take place in Charlotte, North Carolina this December 12th and 13th, with divisions across many age groups, both co-ed and girls. Registration opens September 2nd. For more information, check out popwarner.com. Now back to the episode. That's interesting. I know that this is true of all youth sports. It just seems that every team out there and every program out there just wants to play games. And you see it particularly in the travel sports. Football is a little different than that, but we do have a lot of groups that are focused on that game day, on the game itself. So really good feedback in terms of just, not losing sight of practice and fundamentals throughout the week to help you prepare for that. So I guess from taking on that is it's not the scrimmage that prepares you most. It's the actual just team practice fundamentals that get you more prepared for the game than any scrimmage would.
That's exactly right. And that's the whole purpose. That's the whole point of Bill Walsh's book. If you do the work in practice, if you buy into the system, if you constantly develop your own techniques and conditioning and all the rest of it in practice, then the score takes care of itself on game day. You got to execute better than the opposition, and there are no magic bullets. There are no magic plays. Philly special is once in a lifetime play, and saved for the biggest game of the year. And everybody in the National Football League, they call gadget plays. Everybody in the National Football League has one, and they practice it every week. But because it was in a big spot in the biggest game of all, it gets incredible media coverage. That's not what won for the Eagles. What won was the ability to execute that play. Vince Lombardi famously said, there's a lot of Lombardi quotes. The one that means the most to me is, it's not what you know that counts as the coach. It's what the players know and can execute that counts. So, especially with young players, the less verbiage you have, the less complexity you have, the fewer number of plays that you have, the fewer number of defenses that you have, the better. Master the fundamentals, and if you can master the fundamentals, you're going to win your share of games.
You mentioned the players, and I know Peyton Manning has always said great things about you. And one of the things that I had read is that you were always walked, he said, the stretch line, talking to players before the game, and just how present were you with the players, and what was your relationship like with your players?
Well, I was really very present. And I've told all of the guys that have been in our program, went on to become general managers. Number one, when the team's there, you have to be there. It's fun to go and scout, but not at the expense of being around the team, because you literally have to have your finger on the pulse of the team every day, because there are issues that are going to come up that the coach can't handle, that you're going to have to handle. And if the coach can't handle them and you're not there, they don't get handled. So that's number one. Number two, I started out as a coach. So I spent 10 years in coaching. So, that's my focus. And I recognize that the players are everything. I mean, the old story, you can't go to town without the horses. Well, the horses are the players. Those are the guys that make it work. And so knowing them, being around them, getting them to know you as a person, not as a boss, is important. And the older the player becomes, going from the youth level to high school level to college to the pro level, when they become adults, young adults, the more they understand your point of view, the better off they are. Now, that doesn't mean that I go around yelling at people all day. That doesn't work either in coaching or otherwise. But you want to be around. You want to make sure that whenever a player went on injured reserve, I talked to him about it, about what to expect going forward, about what we expected from him, to not get his dauber down. Don't be upset. Let yourself heal. Football's a 100% injury rate game, especially at the pro level. Those kinds of things, getting to know the families, the players' families. So that was important to me, because let's face it, they're the ones that fill the stadium. They're the ones that win games, and so it's our first dictum in any organization I've ever led is players and coaches come first. And I would say that I spoke to the team twice a year, once at the beginning and once at the end. The rest of the time belongs to the coach. But during those meetings, I said, look, if you have an issue, whatever it may be, personal, financial, football, or otherwise, if it's on-field football, you got to go talk to the coach, and preferably your position coach. But otherwise, my door is open. My phone is always on. And absent the owner talking to me, I'll drop everything I'm doing, and my assistant was informed. Whenever a player came to see me, I'd stop what I was doing, come on in, and then the support people were instructed the same way. If a player needs something, get it for them. If they come first. Not your needs or my needs or anybody else's needs. Their needs come first. And if that's how you create culture, Your program equals your culture. Now, the other side of that coin is that the players have responsibility too. Number one rule, 100% effort in everything we do is the price of admission. You don't get a pat on the back for doing your best. We expect it every day. Number two, be on time. Don't be late. Number 3, be a good citizen. Obey the law. Don't do things that don't reflect well on the franchise or your family or any group that you belong to. And those 3 things are all we ask, but they encompass a great deal. And if I spoke at a clinic recently where I said, in this day and age, the most difficult job you do is applying sanctions for people that don't obey the rules, because you want to use it as a teachable moment. On the other hand, you have to be fair to the other 53 or 52 guys or however many guys there are on the team. And you have to send a message to everybody that if you don't obey the rules, this is what will happen. Well, Tony Dungy taught me. I was searching for something. You can, I think the idea that you can make guys run laps and things like that, okay. I don't know how much good that does in the long run. That's the old way. That's the way I learned as a player. But Tony made the point in the context of fighting one time. He said, you can fight all you want. Number 1, you're probably going to get thrown out of the game. Number 2, you're going to get fined. You're going to hurt the team. But most importantly, if you fight, you're not going to play. You'll be standing next to me on the sideline. And that was a wow moment for me, a eureka moment for me. There it is. There's the sanction. So, but you have to be strong about it. So if your best player is late, then hey, sit down. You might lose the game, but you'll win the season and create a program.
One of the things you talk about culture, and I want to go back and talk about your Buffalo experience a little bit, because when I think about those Bills teams in the 90s, the thing that really, as a fan, just from my perspective, I was a young kid at the time, but that team really stayed intact, and doesn't seem to be a whole lot of changes in players and different positions. You had Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith. You had a whole cast of characters that really stayed together, and I think that's pretty much of a testament of the culture that was probably built in Buffalo at the time, and then the commitment they had to each other. 4 of them are now in the Hall of Fame. Marv Levy's in the Hall of Fame as well, as are you. What was special about that team and what they were able to accomplish, as a team in that stretch?
Well, again, to paraphrase Bill Walsh, it was, and quote directly Marv, it was the program that created the culture, that created that team, that made them want to stay there. Now, that was before free agency. Free agency only came in at the very end of our run. So that impinged, free agency is a different issue. But we had the very same camaraderie in Indianapolis, even though we lost players. And sometimes, it's heartbreaking when you have to let a player go. He's making more money and he's taking care of his family. It's still heartbreaking. But the program created the culture, which created the team. Part of the program is to draft good people, good players and good people. And that's what we did. And we kept doing it, especially in the face of a lot of criticism in both places from the media. Example, in Indianapolis, we couldn't agree on a corner. We needed a corner badly. The media was screaming, get a corner, we need a corner. They're yelling on television, this guy is perfect, that guy's perfect. We couldn't agree. None of us felt there was anybody, the coaches and the scouting staff didn't feel like we had anybody there that was worth it. So we traded down with the New York Giants. So we were bottom of the first round. We traded, I think we were 24th. We went to 31st, I believe. And the best player, we let the board talk to us. The best player was Reggie Wayne. We took Reggie Wayne. And first of all, a lot of people didn't know him because Miami hadn't been on television a lot. And and they screamed and yelled, "This is terrible. He's awful. They don't need another receiver. They got Marvin Harrison." Well, Reggie will be in the Hall of Fame hopefully this year, if not this year, soon, very soon. That's what the board told us to do. That's what the program told us to do. And we were thrilled to get Reggie because we added another high character, high performance guy to our football team. And it worked out in the end. So in Buffalo, believe me, the place was a mess. The lead columnist in town said, "Let them leave. I hope they leave. We're better off without them. They're a detriment to Buffalo, not a positive." A lot of bad things had happened in Buffalo. The steel mills had closed. Over 200,000 people had left. It was a bad time, and the Bills had been through 2-14 seasons. So, I mean, it was not a good situation, but we installed the program. Coach Levy got everybody on the same page and made believers of them, as only he can do. Hired great coaches, and off we went. The end result was the result of a lot of hard work building the program. And again, program equals culture.
You speak a lot about program, and I know you seem very passionate about that, as I'm sure you are. But you had an opportunity in Carolina to start from scratch, and what was that opportunity like to build something new, something different in a new city for the NFL?
Well, we had two things going for us. Most people said, "Well, the expansion draft won't be anybody in the expansion draft," and they were right. But we also had the ability to have a zero salary cap. So we put both things together and said, how can we build the best team we can as quickly as we can? Because we had to sell PSLs, personal seat licenses, in order to generate the money to build the stadium. So it wasn't, wow, we got this beautiful new stadium, come on in here. None of that. We had to earn the money to build the stadium, which meant selling PSLs, which meant having as competitive a team as we could have right off the bat. So having realized that, we went ahead and said, okay, let's take the lowest contract numbers we can among players that we think will help us in the expansion draft. I think we ended up maybe with 10 or so expansion draft players on our team. And then the rest will come through free agency and waivers. And so that's how we built the team, with a lot of veteran players. And they were high character, really good players, especially on defense. And Dom Capers and Vic Fangio were able, with those quality veterans, to install very quickly a defensive system that worked very well. And then offensively, we drafted Kerry Collins. He wasn't ready to play right away. Frank Reich played for, I think, about 6 or 7 games, and then Kerry stepped in when he was ready to step in and do the job. And then we had a lot of cast-offs on offense, guys that weren't big names, but became really good players. Joe Pendry was a tremendous offensive coordinator. Dom was the defensive mind, along with Vic. Just the same description of staff that I gave you to start the conversation. And he did a phenomenal job, and we were in the championship game in the second year because our circumstance dictated that we do X. There's no silver bullet. You have to deal with the circumstances, the cards you were dealt at the time, and then you try to make the best of that situation, which we did. We put all those great minds together and came up with a program, and to Mr. Richardson's credit, he bought into the fact that, hey, the players come first; they're the most important guys. So that part of it was easy in the sense that we were all on the same page, and away we went. But that culture was because of Mr. Richardson's approach to the players, and most importantly, because Dom established it.
The and the how that market grew as an NFL market has really benefited us at Pop Warner. We have a great league. Pop Warner Little Panthers has several teams in the area, so we work closely with the Panthers, and they've been really friendly to.
Both my grandsons played.
That's great. It's a
That
good
area.
league, and as I mentioned before we started chatting on the episode, our Super Bowl is going down to Charlotte, so we're excited about that, and I know we're getting a lot of support from that NFL city and the Panthers. So, wanted to move on here a little bit and just make sure we noted your time with Indianapolis, particularly that Super Bowl run. You know, what stands out to you during that year and that accomplishment as you look at your entire career? What made that year the year that you got to won the Super Bowl?
Well, what made that the year was the three previous years, or four previous years, really. We had been knocking on the door, and probably should have been to two more Super Bowls. We had, one of those games in the championship game in '03. The officials just bit our heads off, and we had no chance to win under those circumstances. It happens from time to time. But the bitterness of that loss spurred us on. We picked up the mantle and came back under Tony's leadership. And then we in '05 we had the best. I believe it was '05. Don't hold me to the years; they all run together. But we had the best team in the league, no question about it. And Tony's son passed away, and that derailed us emotionally. And we just weren't the same afterwards. But then we had to pick up the pieces and start over again, and that led to the ultimate Super Bowl year, which was really, in many respects, an up and down year because we lost our best defensive player, Bob Sanders, very early in the year, and he didn't come back until very late in the year. As a matter of fact, we went down to Jacksonville, and they ran us for 275 yards, and it was really a function of one guy being out of position on defense and not having Bob, and Tony got it fixed, and Bob came back, and we were able to finish it off with the Super Bowl against Chicago. But there've been a lot. Tony and I talked about this not long ago. Boy, there was a lot of heartache leading up to that. It was a hard go, but because of Tony's, the title of his first book was Quiet Strength. Because of his quiet strength, because of his ability to get the guys focused on what overcoming adversity. Coach Levy used to say, expect adversity, expect more to overcome it. That was part of our DNA. And all the heartache and the heartbreak from a football standpoint that led up to that was what got us there. And I've often said, and now I've had a number of players on those teams agree and say, yeah, it's the same way. The most exciting and the most joyful victory for us was over the Patriots in the championship game. The Super Bowl is, there's a lot of falderall and a lot of hoopla and a lot of nonsense that surrounds it. And when you win, you don't even get your team back together in the locker room until 2.5 hours after the game. It's really it's almost an anticlimax. It isn't. I mean, it's the most important game, but the celebration isn't the same. When you win the championship game and you're on to the Super Bowl, you've reached the top of the mountain. You only got one more step to go. And we did it in front of our home fans, and that's the pure, unadulterated joy. But there was a lot of heartbreak along that road.
Good. Yeah, I want to switch gears here and really talk about your experience with the competition committee. Is this something that you were involved with for most of your career in the NFL? But I want to give you a little bit of context. I said at Pop Warner we do something similar. Like we steward the game, we make sure that the rules are fair, the integrity of the game is in there, and we also focus on safety. So we made a set of rule changes over the past several years, as well as the NFL is always evolving as well. What has been your approach when you were on that committee? What was your approach to stewarding the game?
Well, first of all, Tom Flores, a good friend and a fellow Hall of Famer, said this. Um, the highest honor you could get in the National Football League, aside from a gold jacket, is to be a member of the competition committee. Because, as Paul Brown told me when he gave me my orientation when I joined the committee, we are the guardians of the game. It's our job to make sure that the game stays relevant, that it is entertaining for the fans, and that it's safe for the players, and that we play on a level playing field. Everybody has a level playing field, and that's the charge of the competition committee. And so, with that as the bedrock philosophy, now you're looking at rules proposals, you're looking at roster limits, you're looking at all of everything that happens on the field through those eyes. How do we keep the playing field level? How do we keep the game relevant and entertaining? And most of all, how do we keep it safe for the players? So that's the lens through which we looked at every proposal that came before us. And when you think of it, I mean, when I think back on it, I have to laugh. I'm just, a kid from the Bronx with a dream of someday being a small college coach, and I end up in the room with Don Shula and Bill Walsh and Paul Brown and George Young and Tom Flores and Jim Finks. I'd look around sometimes and say, "What am I doing here?" And of course, they all became great friends. It was the most enjoyable thing I've ever done in football.
Yeah, I know the NFL kind of sets a tone for everything that happens underneath it at the college level.
And we're well aware of that. We're
Yeah,
well aware of it.
one of the things that I know from our perspective has been a little challenging is we made some moves early on, not early on, several years ago, for younger age kids related to like 3-point stance and kickoffs. And I'll use kickoffs as an example. We made a drastic change in our kickoff rules. The NFL seemed to make a drastic change in kickoff rules, as you're probably aware. But the other two levels, high school and college, they have not followed. They've seemed very more similar to what they had in the past than anything different. And I think from our perspective is we try to steward the game in a way that hits all the points that you just made, particularly safety. But part of safe football is kids that are prepared. And before we can get a Pop Warner kid up to the NFL, we need to prepare them for success at the middle school level, at the high school level. And then hopefully, they can move on to college and maybe the NFL. But how does the sport need to be more cohesive throughout all the levels in terms of its rules and in the development and the evolution of the game?
Well, it starts with safety. And that's what drove us to make the changes with the kickoff. Because starting with the onside kick, which was nothing more than a train wreck, guys running into each other at a 10-yard interval, and then going to the kickoff and looking at the injuries data, which the NFL does a great job of cataloging and talking to the medical experts who understand exactly that, the docs understand what mechanisms cause injury. All of that input, including that from the helmet manufacturers, led us to believe that, and this is a statement that the committee wholeheartedly adopted. If we'd been inventing football from the start, we would not have had the kickoff. It's just, it doesn't make sense. It's too dangerous a play. Having said that, it's been there for over 100 years. And so we felt like we couldn't change it so dramatically that we started the ball on the 25-yard line and snapped it and went from there. That would have been my preference, by the way. But there were a number of other people on the committee that felt like, no, we can't make that drastic a change. So we spent a lot of time with the special teams coaches going through technique, back to what we talked about however long ago we began this conversation. It all starts with technique. What technique can we adapt that is safest, and then let's make the rules around that. So that's what we did. And now, ironically enough, this year they want to encourage more returns. So they tweak the rules a little bit so that you don't get the sort of the automatic touchback. We'll see how it goes. I probably would have voted against this rule had I had a vote. I think we were doing fine the other way, but that's okay. There's 9 members of the committee, and they all have a voice and they all have a vote, and this was in their wisdom what they thought was best. So one thing they will do is sit down after the season and go through every single statistic and see where, how many injuries we have, where is the ball being snapped, how does that affect scoring, etc. And that's how you craft rules. But you start with those bedrock principles. And if you do that, you can't go wrong. And my experience on the competition committee proved to me beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'll exclude myself, when you put 8 really great professionals in a room and give them 2 to 3 weeks to talk about what the game should look like and how we should do, you come out with a heck of a great product. That's one of the reasons the NFL is so popular.
Good. It's definitely an exciting sport, and we're happy to be on the path to the NFL at Pop Warner. I want to wrap up here, and I appreciate the time, but I wanted to wrap up with I guess 2 more questions. The first is, you said you referred to yourself as a kid from Brooklyn, or
the Bronx,
and then you're up here in the at the highest levels of the NFL, and just talk about your path. I mean, you were that kid from the Bronx, and you had I would say you had a path full of that required a little bit of grit to get where you're at. But like, how did you progress and work your way into the sport and up?
Well, out of school, I would have been very happy to be the head coach at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, where I'd been an assistant, and have my career. That be my career path. I never had aspirations of going to the NFL. Because it just was too distant. I wasn't a player, and that's step one. And hadn't coached at Ohio State or Notre Dame. That's step 2. So it was a distant destination, if you will. But as I progressed in my career, more and more people told me, you really belong in the personnel business. You really. That's your niche. And I liked it, but I like coaching too. But circumstances intervened. The new athletic director came in at the Merchant Marine Academy. We all got fired. And I had to go into the business world to support my family. But my college coach had gone to Montreal as the director of player personnel. And he called me up out of the blue and said, listen, you need to be in football. It's the right path for you. I'm going to give you a part-time job scouting the NFL for us, because in Canada, most of your players are people who are cut from the NFL. They don't come directly from college. And so he did. And at the end of that first season, he called me and said, we're in the playoffs. Coach would like you to come up and meet with him. So I did. I came up, and he said to me, I've been reading your scouting reports. Well, that astounded me to begin with. I never imagined that a coach and general manager of a pro team would read some lowly scouts reports, right? But he did, and he said, I really think that you'd be a huge addition to this organization. You could really help us, and so I want to expand your duties. And the coach was Marv Levy, and now you know the rest of the story. Took me with him to Kansas City, and my life changed and my career changed. And as I like to say, most of what I know about pro football, I learned from Marv Levy, and most of what I know about life, I learned from Marv Levy. So it was a blessing for me to to have the opportunity to work for him and become his friend and colleague for all these years.
Perfect. One thing I've been asking the guests, and I want to do something a little different with you, but I've always ended asking a lot of our guests so far have been players. I've always ended asking them what they would tell a team of 12-year-olds at the start of the season. I think you could bring a different perspective. I mean, what we're trying to accomplish here is just developing youth for like success on and off the field, lifelong impact, away from the game. And I know there's interest that kids have of breaking into the sport as a player, but they could be an executive, they could be a scout. What would you say to a kid about the opportunities that football has for them that are off the field, maybe in the front office, maybe on the sidelines and so forth? What could the message be to those kids?
Well, it starts with, be where your feet are. Your feet are as a player. And then Duffy Daugherty used this little couplet, which made perfect sense to me when I first heard it, and still does now. If you can't be a highway, be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. But no matter how big or small your task, be the best at what you are. So strive to be the best at what you are, where you are, whether it be in a classroom, on the field. Master the things that are necessary to be good there. And don't worry about what the future holds. Don't worry about some ephemeral goal going forward. Be the best that you can be, because the skills that you will learn in doing that, the habits that you will develop in doing that, will stand you in good stead no matter what you do in later life. If you're like me and you love the game and you want to be in it in some way, there have never been more avenues to do so, because there's so much media that cover it. There's so many more people now that work for franchises, be it on the football side, the marketing side, the financial side. There's just oodles of jobs that didn't exist when I was a young man breaking into the business. So there's plenty of opportunity, but develop yourself so that when the opportunity comes along, you're ready to take advantage of it. I'll end with this part of my story. When I became general manager of the Bills, I had gone from being a small college coach to a scout in an inferior league to a personnel director in the USFL, to an interim general manager in the USFL, to a pro scout in Buffalo. So when Mr. Wilson offered me the job as GM, I was prepared. Nobody knew who I was. I introduced myself to the media by saying, I'm Bill Who. You have no idea who I am, because I'm not a household name. I didn't play. I didn't coach at a high level. But this is what I've done. I'm prepared for the job. And I was. I was prepared for the job because of all of the other things that I did. So build that foundation. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So, build that foundation. And if you're lucky enough to get an opportunity, be ready when the time comes.
Perfect. Hey, Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed the conversation. And just hope to see you this December at our Pop Warner Super Bowl.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
For Pop Warner, I'm your host, Tim Glaze. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This podcast is a production of Pop Warner Little Scholars, the premier national governing body for youth football and cheer and dance. Visit us at popwarner.com.